ain't even tripping, I ain't never double tripping. Cause I'm a player, fly the Himalayas. Let me sit sideways, man. Make me back go, let me fall off. Sipping codeine, cause I gotta kill a cold. Let me sit sideways in the big bin. Oh, you boys, they my brothers, they my friends. Oh, you boys, they my brothers, they my friends. Oh, you boys, they my brothers, they my friends.
CFB Nation by Tulsa Titles. This is our very first show of the Sooner Shakedown. I really appreciate everybody coming on. Obviously, like I'm a huge Sooners fan, but I'm also a Sooner alumni. Things that we are doing here are going to talk recruiting. We're talking Brent Venables. We're going to talk all different aspects Oklahoma, what you're seeing in the offseason during the dead period, what you're seeing this past season, what you're seeing the upcoming season, of course. And basically, the main thing is how much I love Oklahoma football and how much I want you guys to see things that you might not regularly see in different aspects. So let's get right to it. First things first is, we're going to talk the Senior Bowl. With the Senior Bowl that we just came by, we just had, a bunch of Sooners go. Braden Willis, Jarod Gray, Wanye Morris. Just to give you a couple ideas, those guys all did really well. We have an interview with Jarod Gray that we have done here just this last week, which was great. We had a really good time. I'm Jarod Gray, is Jarod Gray. So he'll say that as soon as the video pops up and we're talking to him. His biggest thing is how much he loves the aspect of how Brent Venables is a pure professional and what everything he's done for him. Another good thing is that he talked about for the most time was DeMarco Murray. Obviously, I'm a huge DeMarco Murray fan. Loved coming to him out of high school. He's one of the best recruiters Oklahoma's had in a very long time, and I still think he has the best jump cut I've ever seen in football history. So it was really fun to see him as a player. It's even better to see him as a coach right now because you can see how much he relates to players. That's a big deal to me. It's really fun to watch him just in general being one of the guys, and you can be a coach, you can be a player's coach, but to be in the aspect where the guys relate to you is an entire different world because they're young kids. They relate to young players. They relate to the young coaches, and to see him basically bring guys on and learn to love the things that he's doing. It's just been really good to watch him in general coop with the guys, and be part of the show and just see what he's doing in general with everybody. What's also been really fun to watch is the transition from what he's done Jarod Gray wise to come to Oklahoma. Right, he went to Tennessee. He was a very, very good player at Tennessee. Went to Oklahoma. He talked about coming there because of DeMarco Murray, coming there because of Brent Venables' professionalism and what Brent Venables has done. And that's the biggest thing why I'm here today. Brent Venables, what he's done for this class has just been absolutely amazing. I can't tell you what more I can say about the guy than he's a competent professional. Jarod Gray talked about how he's there for you as a player, as a person. He's not there to just grow you into a better athlete. He wants you to be a better person, and that's a big deal. And to see that out of him is huge. As a player and a coach, and myself, grooming young minds, you want to see the kids not only relate to you, but respect you. And then respect you when they're gone, because it's easier to recruit when you bring somebody in like that. And even though he's older, I mean, Brent Venables has been, at Clemson. He was at Oklahoma for a very long time, defensive coordinator. And as soon as he was gone, it was just a consummate aspect of change. Like, do we really want this? And Oklahoma hasn't had a good defense really since he's left. And Clemson has been an absolute powerhouse defensively. He's had really, really good defensive players. Wilkins in general is one of my favorite players in the NFL from Clemson. And If you're a fantasy guy, he's the DT1 last year in fantasy football. But another thing that I like to talk about when it comes to Brent Venables is the recruiting. When it comes to recruiting, and we're talking about how Brent Venables can do one thing or another, the one thing that we're worried about is how much players they lost last year. I mean, they lost the entire coaching staff overnight. They lost, their quarterback and then their backup quarterback, who was both were 5-star recruits, both top of their class. One goes to South Carolina, one goes to USC. We can argue on who's USC, right? But in that aspect, you lose guys like Austin Stogner as a tight end, which is funny because they brought him back this year. That's something we'll get to in a second. They lose guys like, huge defensive linemen. They lost Latrell McCutcheon at tight end, cornerback. They lost their wide receivers in Williams that went with this quarterback to SC. To lose as much as they lost, and you look recruiting and NFL draft and all that aspect. You saw these guys just didn't know what they were going to get as a new coach. They knew what they had before. They were worried about the massive change that happened overnight. And you saw the True Blood stay, and then you saw a bunch of guys just, I got to go. And it was a mass exodus. It could have killed the program, to be honest with you. You lost 20 starters overnight. And even though you got guys like Jarod Gray that stayed, and, Wanya Morris that just transferred in, Key Lawrence was a big player from Tennessee that stayed. Those guys transferred in, so they're not going to leave right away. That's a big aspect. And you get to see, different things, such as players coming in and new coaching staff and what you're doing. The big things that Brent Venables did was he was able to keep DeMarco Murray. He was able to keep Bill Bedenbaugh, right? Bill Bedenbaugh is probably one of the best offensive line coaches in all of football, let alone just college football. He's a great mind. Oklahoma is considered offensive line university for a reason. Give you an idea that a third of all offensive linemen that played in the Super Bowl are from Oklahoma. So it tells you how good of an offensive line mind he is. Keeping Bill Bedenbaugh was massive for Oklahoma. Also keeping DeMarco Murray, who's a player, a coach, good recruiter. Big things that had to happen. And we got to see that. So as we look at the recruiting aspect and you saw these guys leave, one thing they did last year and one thing that his previous coach didn't like as Brent Venables, he brought in a top 10 transfer portal class, which he had to do. He brought in a, decent quarterback. He brought in decent running backs. He brought in, decent wide receivers, defensive line, linebackers. With all these guys leaving and everybody that rolled in and out, the transfer portal was key for him. Well, he did that again this year, bringing another top 10 transfer portal class, a top 5 recruiting class, which is something that Lincoln Riley has never done. He's never had a top 5 recruiting class. And, when we talk about the transfer portal, let's just get into the nits and crannies about the transfer portal because that was huge for him. Big players like Dason McCullough, Trace Ford, Reggie Pearson. Reggie Pearson played against Texas Tech or at Texas Tech against Oklahoma, had 11 tackles in the last game. That's something that OU needs in the background is a guy who can tackle. When you get 11 tackles in one game as the safety, I'm all about it. Huge guy. He's not small by any means. He's, 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's a big kid, lays big hit. If you watch the OU game, versus Texas Tech, the very first big hit that, you saw the quarterback take, we saw that out of my man, Reggie Pearson. And we were worried right away. Like, we're about to lose this game right now because we lost our quarterback because it was, that early. And then, or that late in the game where we could have not had him at all towards the end. We had 13 transfers. We saw USC bring in 13 transfers last year, was an instant impact. They were in the playoff, talk, and they were a team that wasn't very good the last 2 or 3 years. And they've had good players. They just haven't had good coaching. And they have had really great transfer portal recruiting. Oklahoma did that. They brought in a tight end from Blake Smith out of Texas A&M. They brought Austin Stogner back from South Carolina. You could tell that he missed it. He's back. He's a big kid. He's 6'6". He's 230 pounds. He can block. He can catch. So that's a huge grab for them. Blake Smith, 6'4", 250 pounds. He can block. He can catch. He sits that mind of where you can see him block like Braden Willis does. You can see him catch like Braden Willis does. That was a huge loss for them. So adding both those guys, really big deal. Walter Rouse, offensive tackle out of Stanford, 6'5", 280 pounds. He started over 1,000 snaps at Stanford. To say that you're getting a guy that has experience was huge, because they lost Anton Harrison, they lost Wanya Morris. Those are two massive losses on the offensive tackle side, on one on each side. So he's going to play one of those. Guyton will probably be the other in that aspect. Huge grab for them. Wide receivers, you had some guys leave, you had some guys come in. You still got Jalil Farouk. Obviously, they lose Marvin Mims to the draft, but bringing Andre Anthony from Michigan, 6'2", 180 pounds, get him some time with Smitty. That dude's just going to blow up. He'll probably be close to 200 by the time summer's over. And nothing against Michigan's weight class program, but Smitty's different. I don't know anybody says anything different about how much they like him. Defensive line is where my man Venables always brings in a good player. So you got David Sears, the defensive line out of Texas State, really big kid, played really well at Texas State. You got Rondell Bothroyd out of Wake Forest. He balled. I mean, that dude has had 20 sacks last 2 seasons. He's had, 20 tackles for loss last 2 seasons. Venables knows him when he was at Clemson, recruited him while he was at Clemson. So he knows what he's getting out of Bothroyd. And he's going to be in a really good rotation defensive line-wise, because they just keep bringing in good kids. They brought in Lucas Zinga at punter, which most people ain't talking about this, right? Or El Zinga is what his name is. Losing the punter they lost, they need to bring another punter. And so that was just an immediate impact that they're going to have there. But then you get guys like Trace Ford out of Oklahoma State. You're just like, man, to get a guy from one of your rivals is huge, because he's a presence. He played very well at Oklahoma State. He's a good transfer out of Oklahoma State. So he'll be an immediate impact as well. But the main guy that I want to talk about, freshman All-American Dason McCullough, got his brother at safety as well, which was huge, because you get a really good recruiter, a really good safety out of the recruiting class. And then you get Dason McCullough, who's a absolute monster at 6'5", 225, who will definitely put on weight this summer. So if you see him at 235, don't be shocked at all. It sounds like he's going to play the same position, kind of like a hybrid linebacker position at 6'5", and you're able to play that position. It's crazy, because you have to be everywhere, and you have to be a versatile player, which means you got to be different. And he's different. I mean, he's a freshman All-American. He had 5 sacks last year. He had 18 tackles for loss at Indiana. He's a massive grab for Oklahoma, and probably a steal by getting both of him and his brother. That was the biggest moves I think they could have done, when we're talking about getting a player. And it's just fun to see what Oklahoma has done so far on, the transfer portal side, because you really didn't know what they were going to able to do, or everybody was worried about who they were going to get. Jacob Lacey out of Notre Dame, who a lot of us thought was going to be Isaiah Foskey's replacement. this coming year. He's been there. He's 285 pounds. He's 6'2", really good presence in the middle. It's just really good for Oklahoma to get that type of leadership in the defensive line wise. I know we've always want to talk about recruiting, so let's get to recruiting. It's just one of those things that we have to talk about. We want to talk about, we'll talk about this class, and we'll talk about the upcoming class. So our biggest grabs, we will say Jackson Arnold. PJ Attaboy was a absolute monster in the Under Armour All-American Bowl. He played great. Let's just talk about the elephant in the room, Peyton Bowen. I called it weeks out. Girlfriends are undefeated during flipping season. I've never seen a kid flip twice in 24 hours, but we got to see that. And people were coming at my head on Twitter that Peyton Bowen was going to Oregon. I said, listen, man, it's attractive. I get that. But he ain't signed his letter of intent yet, so I don't believe it. And he's like, well, it's on his Instagram. Like, that's great. Girlfriends are undefeated during flipping season. And his girlfriend goes to Oklahoma as a soccer player, and Peyton Bowen switches, which is great for Jackson Arnold because Jackson Arnold gets to keep a friend close by. He's an absolute stud. Oklahoma has a settled quarterback room, but I'll be shocked if Jackson Arnold isn't the guy, midseason. And it would be nice if they're, stay undefeated and he was the guy. We could see one of those weird things where he doesn't play all season and then comes in the bowl game or playoff games and start absolute dogging people because nobody sees it coming. Kind of like Oklahoma did against Alabama in the bowl game. But with the big switch coming, that's a big one. Makari Vickers, safety out of Monroe Day in Florida. Always getting Florida kids is huge. Oklahoma has always done really good at getting California and Florida kids. He's a really good player. Caden Green out of Missouri. Oklahoma's weird about getting these Missouri kids. They sometimes no. Really like him. Everybody wants to talk about different players, the 5 stars, but Caleb Hicks, running back out of Denton, Texas, huge grab for Oklahoma. That's all DeMarco Murray. I don't care what anybody says. That's a massive get. Phil Picotti from ING Academy. Any ING Academy kid is going to be a good grab for Oklahoma, but they need a solid linebacker, 6'3", 225. List is a 3-star. You've seen his tape. He's more than a 3-star. It's just what it is. And then they've got a few, preferred walk-on kids, and they got, legacy players that are coming that are preferred walk-ons. I think it's funny because I think that kid's still under scholarship in some aspect. They just announced 4 scholarship players at practice recently. That was big to them. Let's get to the upcoming class of recruiting. We want to bring players in that we expect to play well. We want, everybody wants to know who's next. And, well, who's next is a wide receiver, that Wesco out of Midlothian. And Crystal Ball has him going to Oklahoma. There's an if about him going to Oklahoma. And, I just want to pull his stuff up for you real quick. Just on there. Bryant Wesco out of Midlothian. He's 6'2", 180 pounds. Here's what I'm going to tell you, 100% he's going to Oklahoma. He likes the program. His sister plays soccer at Oklahoma. She's a sophomore, Bailey. She's actually in one of my classes. So I'm just going to tell you, there ain't no warm about this. It's 100%. He's going to Oklahoma. He can be a premier player there. It's a premier grab for Oklahoma. I think they're going to grab Mario Craver as well. He's out of Langston Hughes in Georgia, which if you can get any kid, he's out of Alabama. If you get a kid out of Alabama, that's massive to me. They have a 5-star, Danny Brown, visiting next week or next month. That's a massive gift for Oklahoma if they can get him. He's the #1 linebacker in the class. He's a top 6 player in the entire country. And he already has some blood with Venables. So getting Brown to even visit again, because he visited a year ago, almost exactly right now, their junior day, and he to have him come back right now, and that's his only visit during the dead period is Oklahoma. So getting him fresh and here is a thought in general. They have a quarterback in their class that they're looking at, and you know everybody was like, well, who's the next guy? All it takes is to be in a position where you bring in Spencer Rattler and then you bring in Williams and something's just not clicking. You switch them, you have a big play, and you've got a starting quarterback where you didn't have a starting quarterback. Now, here's the thing: is I don't think that's the thing with Jackson Arnold. I think he's a stud. I think he's going to be there. I think he's the guy. But Michael Hawkins is in a weird spot. He's from McKinney, Texas. He's 6'2", almost 6'3", 200 pounds. Really, really solid kid. He's a 4-star right now. He could easily be a 5-star. He's one of the top kids in the class. And the biggest thing is if he feels like he can't be there. And here's why I say this. Because Oklahoma has 2 quarterbacks on roster that have more than 2 years of eligibility left. And it's the 2 guys that are starting. And Dillon Gabriel can come back next year. Whether a lot of people know this or not, he still has another year that he can use besides this coming year. Do I think he stays? No. I think this is his final year at Oklahoma. And I think they basically tell him, like, listen, Jackson Arnold's our guy. I've said this, I think Jackson Arnold's the guy anyway. And it's going to be hard for Dillon Gabriel to hold him off. He's going to have a massive spring and be better than he was, because Jackson Arnold is the truth, and I just really believe that. But getting Michael Hawkins to commit early, which is a very big possibility, would be huge for Oklahoma for the recruiting class, because they have a lot of guys. Now, I think they're going to get certain players that we don't expect, certain players that we do expect. I think the wide receiver out of Denton Geyer, who played with his quarterback Arnold last year, who had 886 yards receiving, he's a guy that I expect to commit to Oklahoma this coming year. He already knows, his quarterback. And to get a guy who's had 61 receptions in high school, 800 yards and 9 touchdowns, that'll be huge. So Martin, I believe, also commits to Oklahoma soon. He isn't a huge, 4 or 5-star kid right now. He's a 3-star, but I think he gets his 4-star. So that's a big thing to me. All right, let's get to our last thing. I know I'm pushing it time-wise. So spring game comes up April 22nd. This will be massive for everybody. It'll be big for recruits. It'll be big for the coaching staff. Obviously, fans packed the stadium, last year, knowing Brent Venables was back, which I'll be honest with you, a little worried that they weren't going to have that type of crowd. It's going to be hot. It's either going to be hot or pouring. So let's pick one. It'll never be in between. Let's get a 65 and sunny, great day. It's not going to happen, but let's pray for it. And we'll get right to that. I think what people obviously want to see, Gavin Shawchuk, they want to see, Brooks, running backs wise. They want to see the wide receiving core gel with the quarterbacks. Everybody wants to see if Jackson Arnold is the guy. Everybody wants to see if Peyton Bowen is going to be a premier safety. With the guys that they brought in, in the recruiting class that we expect to be very strong. And what are we going to see out of Oklahoma this coming year? I'm going to make a bold statement. Oklahoma goes undefeated in regular season. The first 3 games are going to be absolute blowouts. And I don't think you have to worry about that. They get Iowa State at home, which is massive. They get Cincinnati. I understand that after that they go Cincinnati. But Cincinnati is very depleted. They lost a lot of players, lost coaching staff. They're in rebuild mode. Don't worry about them. Then we got Texas. Always one of those weird games. And I get that Texas got Oklahoma last year, but when you're coming in, you get to see a quarterback was a four-string quarterback at Pittsburgh as your starter. Now you got to worry about Dylan Gabriel or Jackson Arnold playing against Texas. So we've got a two-headed monster too. And I get that you guys got your two-headed monster, but I like ours better. Nothing against Arch. Just think Jackson Arnold's a better quarterback. I think he's a better athlete. So that's your biggest shift. Let me give you two things that we don't have to worry about this year. We don't have to worry about Baylor, and we don't have to worry about Kansas State. Kansas State been a thorn in our side for years, and we don't play them this year because the new guys coming in. Got Central Florida, you got BYU, we got Cincinnati. Play 3 of the 4 new guys that are coming in. Not really worried about SMU in the first 3 games. So again, that's what we got for the first part of the thing for the first show, and I appreciate you guys. And till next week, Boomer Sooner, baby, let's go.